Hello, my name is Anna Brandis, and today is May 17th, 2025. This is the summer semester, and the title of my class is Criminal Justice System. Okay, so we're going to start off with first researching Contacts Between Police and the Public 2020 by Susanna N. Tapp and a couple other authors. So we're just going to search it here. This will take us right to the PDF. We'll start here. So the first question in this section is, what percentage of the U.S. population over 16 had any contact with the police? The answer can be found on the front page here, where it clearly states that 21% of the population had contact with them. And how does this compare against 2018? Well, in 2018, that number was 24%. The next question is, how are the police contacts initiated? They are initiated, here we find the information on this side, by resident-initiated contacts or by some sort of police interaction where they are approached, sometimes during traffic stops. And those rates are about the same as the prior, which was 21% in 2020, down from 24% in 2018. Next, we're going to examine what is the racial and ethnic breakdown of contacts with the police. So for that information, we are going to go right to Table 1 of this PDF here. And we can see that the percentage varies either higher or lower based on who initiates the contact. So for police initiated contact, we can see that it was highest among the category of other. But alternatively, of races that can be defined, then the white race was next in line to initiate contact with the police. On the contrary, residents who initiated contact is lower for Black, Hispanic, and Asian compared to white. So Hispanic lower than Blacks and Asians lower than Hispanic. What are the gender differences, and does it matter who initiates contact by gender? Let's look at the gender affiliation. So by and large, police-initiated contact by males is 11% versus females at 8.6%. But when it comes to resident-initiated contact, women or females contacted police more often than their male counterparts. Question E. What is the most common type of initiated contact? The most common type, which I believe, I'm guessing it's this category, is how I'm interpreting that. They tend to initiate contact with people categorized in other. They're not defined by a particular race. And what are the racial differences? So here we see that between white, Black, Hispanic, and Asian, whites are contacted at much higher rates than the other races. So then the question is, can this data show that race is the motivation and not the activity? And my answer would be, if the motivation is presumed to be on a racial bias, then this chart does not reflect that. The additional commentary says, in other words, do the data clearly show bias by the police, or can the actions of the people that the police are interacting with cause or influence the police to interact with them? The answer is, of course. These numbers are just facts. They don't have any feelings. But what percentage of people get pulled over for tickets? For that, we are going to go down to a different chart. I believe it is on table 5 for the paragraph above table 5. So we're going to search, well, I think it's might be page 8 here, table 5. Okay, so here we have says female drivers are more likely to be given a warning than male drivers, but here it clearly states while 43% were given a warning, 43% were given a ticket. This is an overall figure. Let's see, and that was question E. No, that was not question E. Apologies. Okay. Of all the contacts with police, how many included the threat or use of non-fatal force? For those figures, we're going to go down to page 11. Here, it shows that overall, there's a likelihood of 2% of this strategy being used. Here we go by. Now this is varies a bit as far as the figures. I may be on the wrong chart here. I think I have to go down to 1. Okay. Here we go. The threat of use of force is more commonly experienced by those who are male. Now, rather than female. Here we it says it was more commonly experienced by persons who were Black. 5% in 2018, 6% in 2020, 5% in 2018 for Hispanics, 3% in 2020, and 2% who were white in both of those years. This varies a little bit from page 1, where it has similar figures. It states slightly different statistics as to the threat of force, 6%, 3%, and then 2% overall. It says what types of force were measured. So I'm going to look at here. They have a measure of on table 8 as far as what was used between either shouting or cursing, threat of force, handcuffing, pushing, grabbing, hitting, kicking, using weapon or other force. I find these numbers to be relatively low, which is the next question. So frankly, I expected the numbers to be higher than what I'm seeing here. It says, what percentage of people who contact the police to report a crime say they are likely to contact them again? I would say, let's see, so we're going to go find table 12 for that. Okay, so here we are examining the percent of U.S. residents 16 or older where most recent police contact was resident. Well, you can read. Okay. So the question is, what percentage who contact the police say they are likely to contact them again? And the answer was nearly 93%. It was 92.7. And then when you look at that by race, you could see that whites rank at 93, Black at 81, Hispanic 91.7, Asian 90.2, and other 86.9. Question H. Report the percentages of residents' perception of police response and behavior during contacts to request assistance by race and gender. So it looks to me that based on perception, white or males actually had a slightly sort of better view of the police than in some categories, not all. So for responding promptly, there was a little higher. It's a little lower with in this section, improving the situation. They believe they behaved properly more often. They were satisfied. So overall, among both genders, white respondents, I found, were more likely to view the police positively compared to other racial groups. So you could kind of see across the board. Here they're pretty close to responding promptly. Here they're actually a little lower, so the blacks actually have a little bit better view on this end. They behave properly, they're satisfied, but you can see that in some cases the percentages are, it depends on the circumstances, I'm sure, and that's why they're slightly higher or lower in other areas. There is one notable exception that was in the area of improving the situation. I found this to be sort of interesting. Blacks believed the police made the situation better, and a few points higher. But here, between Hispanic and Asian, Hispanics had a much higher perspective as far as whether the police improved the situation or not between the Hispanic and Asian portion. Okay. What are your overall conclusions of this data? I am pleasantly surprised at these figures. I think that the mainstream media certainly creates a sensationalized and distorted version of the truth. So I am pleased to see this. Do police interact with the public a lot? I would say they interact as much as they are called upon to do so based on the need. So let's see. Do they threaten or use force a lot? Surprisingly, not as much as I expected. Those figures were lower than I thought. And finally, are people happy with the police after interacting with them? I would say yes. I think by and large, people seem to be satisfied with their exchange with law enforcement. Okay, so now we're going to move on to section 2 of this exercise. And so we are going to be looking at the FBI UCR homicide data, the 2019 crime in the United States data to be specific. Use the expanded table 8. So homicide. Table 8 on weapons. Okay. Okay, continuing along. I'd originally sort of looked at this data a little differently in another view, but essentially we arrived at the same figure. So the question is, how many people were murdered in the U.S. in 2019? And that answer is 13,927. How many were killed by rifles? Now, this is to include all rifles, including hunting rifles and assault rifles, but I can't determine whether these were not under that category, so I'm going to stick with just rifles, in which case that number is only 364. 200 shotguns and 1,476 knives, which is right here. How many were killed by unarmed people? That number is 600. Hand, fists, and feet. And so the next question is, so which is responsible for more deaths in the U.S.? Unarmed people with personal weapons or rifles? So if we're looking at personal weapons as just our bodies, that number is 600. But if we're looking at rifles alone, that's 364. So more people were killed by unarmed people than they were by rifles. And it was nearly double. Not quite, but nearly. So the last question is, are unarmed people dangerous? And the answer is yes, they are dangerous. They apparently kill at higher rates than people who are armed. And that concludes this illustration. Thank you.